Yo, what's going on, guys and gals? Dat here, bringing you another NFL DraftKings picks video for Week 15. It's hard to believe we've come this far. The season's almost over. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me and checking out these videos every week. You've been hanging out with me since Week 6, and I appreciate you all. But let's go ahead and get right into the picks this week. Okay, so as always, we're going to start with the quarterback position. As you know, I like to pay down at this position so I can build up some of the other areas. But there are a couple of top-tier options that I'm looking at this week. One of them happens to be Ben Roethlisberger. What can you say about Ben Roethlisberger that hasn't been said already? He's a great quarterback. He had that hiccup in the middle of the season where he had that game where he threw like 5 interceptions, lost all of his confidence, but he's bounced back in a big bad way, and he's been doing great ever since. He's at home in Heinz Field in Pittsburgh, where he averages 8 more DraftKings points per game than on the road. The pass attempts column in his area is just insane, especially for having Le'Veon Bell in the backfield. Now, granted, Bell is pretty heavily involved in the pass game as well, but look at the numbers here. 66, 40, 45, another 45. He's averaging 360 yards passing per game in the past 4 weeks. He has the best receiver in the league with Antonio Brown. He's scored 12 touchdowns in the past 4 weeks. This could turn into a shootout with Tom Brady, who I'm sure is pissed off from losing to the Dolphins. Now, $6,700 is way too cheap for this player. Now, the Patriots have tightened up the pass defense lately, but the Steelers have a lot of weaponry. Bell, Brown, Juju, James, Nix, McDonald. Somebody is going to get open, and Ben's going to find them. So I really like Ben Roethlisberger this week at $6,700. Just below him for $6,300 is Jimmy Garoppolo. He has a favorable matchup against the Titans, who have been terrible the past couple of weeks. In his first 2 starts under center with the 49ers, he's already averaging 313 yards per game, and that's including against the Bears' stingy defense. He's not a touchdown machine like Ben or Brady, but then again, he doesn't have a lot of weapons to work with. Marquise Goodwin is pretty much the only reliable passing option, with Taylor and Aldrich being a bit too inconsistent. I think he might be a tad bit expensive here, but he may be worth plugging into a few lineups. He's somebody I'm taking a look at. Might end up plugging him into a couple of lineups. And moving down into the lower priced quarterbacks, I'm really liking Blake Bortles this week. Now, Bortles' confidence is rising as the Jaguars attempt to journey to the playoffs this season. The past 2 weeks against the Colts and the Seahawks, his passer rating has been strong, almost mistake-free. He's just been getting the job done when we've expected him to lately, and at $5,700, he only needs to get maybe 15 to 18 points to meet value. If he breaks 20 points, which he could very easily do with the ceiling that he has facing a weakened Texans secondary, then we shall reap the rewards and get introduced to some dead presidents. So I really like Blake Bortles. I'm going to have him in a few lineups as well. Actually, you know what? I'm going to plug him into my main lineup here. So Blake Bortles, you are officially in, my friend. Right below him, another guy I'm looking at, Nick Foles. With the MVP candidate Carson Wentz tearing his ACL, Nick Foles will be thrust into the starting position for the rest of the season and into the playoffs. Lots of pressure, but luckily the Eagles are going against the Giants this week, so it will give Foles a nice opportunity to get his feet wet. What we did see against the Rams last week wasn't bad. He managed to drive the Eagles down the field on 2 drives, didn't get any touchdowns, but got into field goal range. Now, after a full week of practice and going up against a weaker defense, we may see more out of this former starter, so keep an eye on Nick Foles. He's definitely going to be in a few lineups of mine, but for all case and purposes, I'm going to stick with Blake Bortles for my main lineup here. So we'll move on to running back. Okay, so at running back, I am back on the Steelers again. I'm just so happy the Steelers are finally back in the main Sunday slate after weeks of waiting. So I'm looking at Le'Veon Bell here. In terms of consistency and workload at the running back position, there is no better option than Le'Veon Bell in a PPR tournament or even in a cash game. The amount of passing targets and receptions he generates is unreal. Plus his patience in the backfield, which allows him to wait for the offensive line to create holes and then explode through, is leaps and bounds beyond anyone else in the game. I don't have to go into too much conversation here about why Le'Veon Bell is a great play. Is he expensive? Yes. Is he worth it? Every single time. He's going to be my lock for this week. He's going to be in every single lineup I play. Now, since we're going to be paying up for a stud running back like Le'Veon Bell, we need to counterbalance this with a lower priced option, but one that can also get us a really good amount of points. Now, the one that caught my eye was Kenyon Drake at $5,800 versus the Bills, who are giving up the second most points to running backs and is looking really, really bad lately. So Kenyon Drake may capitalize here. He's rushed for 100-plus yards in the last 2 games. He's heavily involved in the pass game as well. It almost seems like the same reasoning we had to take Le'Veon Bell in the lock this week, but there's a $5,800 price tag attached to him. So I'll go with that. Kenyon Drake is going to be another option for me. I recommend him heavily. And slightly below Kenyon Drake at $5,000, you got Alex Collins. Collins looked really, really good against the Steelers defense on Sunday Night Football and the weeks prior. He's averaging 76 rushing yards in the past 4 weeks. He's scored 5 touchdowns in that time. He isn't as involved in the passing game as much. That role is more reserved for Danny Woodhead on the offense for the Ravens. The Browns have a pretty stout defense when it comes to the run, but hasn't been looking very solid lately. The Ravens have rushed for 136 yards the last time they played Cleveland, which was in week 2. Is that going to change much? I'm not entirely sure. There were a lot of other options at running back that they were alternating in. They really hadn't settled on a running back yet, but I think Alex Collins is finally the one that they're going to allow the most workload to, and I think he's going to do really good here. So Alex Collins at $5,000 is a good option. I know that a lot of people are going to be chasing after Giovanni Bernard after the great game he had last week, but now that they've raised his price to $5,300 and he's going up against the Vikings, I'm hitting the brakes hard on Giovanni. I don't think he's going to put up as much as he did last time. So you're welcome to try that. I don't recommend it, but it's completely up to you. But I think he's somebody to look at as well. All right, so moving on to wide receivers. There's a lot of wide receiver options that I'm looking at, so I'm just going to get through this as quick as possible. First up, Antonio Brown, another Steeler. Never a bad play. He's the best wide receiver in the league. If you can afford him in your lineup, if you can fit him in, make it happen. Like I said before when I talked about Ben, this is going to be a shootout with Tom Brady. It could equate to more targets and looks, so I will never tell you not to play Antonio Brown. Always a good option no matter who they're facing. Michael Thomas going up against the weak Jets secondary. Targets have been consistent all season long, anywhere from 8 to 11 average. He's playing in home in the dome, so Drew Brees could get loose and air that ball out. Jets have a solid run D, which may slow down Ingram and Kamara if Kamara plays. So Michael Thomas I'm looking at as well. Devin Funchess, small dip in targets and yardage production, but he's been facing some pretty tough defenses, but that will change versus the Packers this week. He's scored 4 touchdowns in the last 4 games, including one against the Vikings cornerback Xavier Rhodes, so that's pretty impressive. So I'm looking at Devin Funchess to go and capitalize against the Packers here. Josh Gordon, even though he hasn't played in quite a while, he has ignited a spark in the Browns offense over the last couple of weeks. He's not putting up monster numbers, but is clearly getting the attention of Deshaun Kaiser, and he's been putting up really decent yardage totals over the past few weeks. And also, the Ravens are going to be missing their star quarterback, Jimmy Smith. He tore his Achilles. He's going to be out, which means the Browns could capitalize on a weakened secondary. Let's see, who else? I'm sorry, I'm going rapid fire here because there's a lot. Marquise Goodwin, he's the number 1 option for Jimmy Garoppolo. Therefore, he's going to get peppered with targets. They're going up against the Titans, which have a pretty subpar defense right now. Marquise Lee, he's the number 1 receiving option for Blake Bortles. So I'm going to have to plug him in here since I already have Bortles already. And they're going up against a weak secondary for the Texans. Already talked about them, so we're just going to stack him with Bortles here. You could also stack him with D.D. Westbrook if you want to, who's a good secondary option if you don't want to go with Marquise Lee, if you're looking for somebody who might be a little bit lower owned. Seems to have really good chemistry with Blake Bortles, despite being inactive most of the season. He's had 20 receptions for 235 yards and 1 touchdown since returning. The Texans may try to focus on Lee more than Westbrook, which could in turn go and open up more looks for Westbrook. So he's another stack option with Bortles if you kind of want to be a little, I guess, contrarian, I guess might be the word. It's just a pivot. Going back to the Steelers, you got Juju Smith-Schuster coming back from suspension, so he should be pretty well rested. The Patriots will be focusing on containing Antonio Brown, which may open up more looks for Juju, so I like him this week too. Let's see, who else? Let's see here, Ted Ginn Jr., he's a cheaper alternative option to Michael Thomas. He's a veteran speedster. He's a downfield threat. While the Jets are attempting to contain Michael Thomas, Ginn could capitalize should Breeze look his way and throw the ball deep. Let's see, Paul Richardson. He's kind of a boom or bust play in my opinion. He doesn't have a high ceiling potential. He does have a high ceiling potential. I take that back. He has a low floor, but he does have a high ceiling. The Seahawks may be struggling versus the Rams and could fall behind because it's just, the Rams are just balling out lately. Their offense has just been amazing. This could cause Wilson to throw the ball a lot more, and Richardson has been on the receiving end of some late-game bombs. If you need a cheap streaming option, he's someone I would consider at his price. And I also have Corey Coleman here, pretty much for the same reasons as Josh Gordon that I mentioned earlier. Like I said, they're going to be without their star cornerback, so it's going to be a little bit easier to get in the flow with the receivers. So Corey Coleman would also be a good option as well. So I kind of blew through all that really quickly. I think I'm just going to go with him and one more. Let's go with this. Okay, so this is going to be my wide receiver core. I think that'll work. So let's move on to tight end. Okay, so if you've been watching the past couple of weeks, you'll know with my tight ends, I have a pretty easy system here. I look and see if the Browns or the Giants are playing, and I plug in the tight end that's going to be facing those defenses because they've been giving up the most points, pretty consistently over the entire season. So with that being said, I'm looking at the Eagles, and I'm looking at the Ravens. Now, obviously the Eagles, Zach Ertz is the guy that I would really like to have. He's only $6,000, a little high for me to pay for a tight end, but Zach Ertz is totally worth it. If he does play, I know he's, I think he's in the concussion protocol right now, but if he does play, he should be targeted pretty heavily against the Giants, who, like I said, give up the most points to tight ends in this entire season. The only risk is whether or not Nick Foles will favor Ertz as much as Wentz did. If Ertz is out, Trey Burton is in play at $4,200. That's a nice pivot there. But again, it kind of falls into the same category of whether or not Nick Foles is going to target the wide receiver more or whether he's going to target the tight ends more. I believe I saw something on Twitter. I think it might have been Adam Leviton who brought up the statistics on that, and I'm pretty sure he targets the wide receivers more, but you still have to consider Zach Ertz or Trey Burton here. So I'm looking at them. The other option, again, I mentioned was the Ravens, who has Benjamin Watson as their tight end. Not in love with this play, but the price is decent at $3,800, and since they're facing the Browns, they give up the second most points to tight ends, just in front of the Giants. Watson doesn't have a very consistent game. Could be a risky play. Might be good in GPPs, not so much cash. So that's somebody who I'd consider as well. Let's see, Kyle Rudolph. I'm watching him closely because it's weird. He played the entire game when the Vikings played the Panthers last week. Didn't show any signs of an injury the entire game, but he was seen leaving the locker room wearing a walking boot. Could just be a precautionary item, but it is worth monitoring all week because Kyle Rudolph has been getting targeted pretty heavily in the end zone over the past 3 weeks, and he's putting up a respectable amount of numbers in the pass game. He's too cheap at $4,700 versus the Bengals, who surrender points to tight ends as they focus more on the wide receiver core of their opponents. So I'm liking Kyle Rudolph here as well. I think he may be the one that I plug in here. Let's see what else is over here. I'm not too crazy about these guys, not so much. Here we go. Mercedes Lewis from the Jaguars hasn't been much of a receiver in the past. He's more of a blocker, but this season he's showing some more signs of consistency. He's either scored or topped 40 yards in the last 6 games. He plays 85% of the offensive snaps. He could be a cheap, low-owned weapon in a good matchup here. So if you're pretty much paying up everywhere else and you need a super cheap, reliable, consistent option at tight end, consider Mercedes Lewis at 2,900. But I think for my purposes here, I think I'm going to go with Kyle Rudolph, just because he's a lower priced option than Zach Ertz, and he's a much more consistent, reliable option than Benjamin Watson. So I'm going to kind of go in the middle here and stick with Kyle Rudolph. Okay, so if you watch my videos over the past couple of weeks, you'll know for defense and special teams, I really don't give it a whole lot of thought. I just kind of plug in a $3,000 or less defense and just kind of hope for the best. But I figured this time around, I need to get used to looking at these statistics and try to make this a more important play as I try to go for more money. So we're just going to have to take a look at some options here. Now, the one I like the most is the higher tier defenses, is the Saints versus the Jets. The Jets are going to be without Josh McCown for the rest of the season after he broke his hand last week. So they're going to be going up against Bryce Petty, who's going to be the quarterback under center as the replacement or the backup. I'm hoping that the Saints will be able to kind of pass rush Petty a lot, try to make him make mistakes, throw interceptions, knock the ball out, do something. So I really like the Saints here against a Bryce Petty-led Jets. The Panthers are somebody I'm looking at as well, but only if Aaron Rodgers is not going to play. I've been seeing it all over Twitter that Aaron Rodgers has been cleared medically, but there have been other people who have interest in Aaron Rodgers as they don't want him to get hurt, so they're talking about keeping him out. It's kind of going back and forth. Nothing's been official yet. I know he's practicing, but yeah, if Aaron Rodgers is in, I'm not looking at the Panthers at all. But if he's out, I think the Panthers are a viable option here. They have a pretty solid defense. Let's see here. The Dolphins locked down Tom Brady and the Patriots in an upset victory on Monday Night Football, and it helped me win quite a bit of money that day in some GPP tournaments. And I think I'm going to let it ride and go back to the well on the Dolphins, doing the same thing to Tyrod Taylor and the Bills. The only thing the Bills have going for them right now is the weather, which they're already accustomed to with all of that snow, and also they have LaShawn McCoy. Everybody else in that offense, not really impressive. So I'm hoping that the Dolphins come to play again this week and do the same thing they did to the Patriots. So there's somebody I'm pretty heavily considering as well. And then a lower cheap price defense. I can't believe I'm even thinking about this, but the 49ers. Now, hear me out here. The Titans, especially Mariota, has been playing like shit lately. Normally, I would not consider the San Francisco 49ers, but their pass rush has been looking pretty good as of late. They've been getting to the quarterback. They've been making sacks. They've been causing some fumbles, and they've been coming away with interceptions here or there. I might take a shot if I'm desperate for a defense and special teams. If I literally paid up everywhere else and I'm bare bonesing it at defense, the 49ers would be somebody I would consider. But for this video, I think I'm going to go with the Dolphins here. Like I said, I don't have much of a salary left, and I think they're a pretty good choice here for what I have available to me. So Dolphins defense, and that's going to be the lineup. All right, so that's going to do it for the picks video for Week 15. Thank you all for tuning in and watching. If you're still here, if you made it to the end of the video, smash that thumbs up button. Let me know you support the channel. I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to be doing any videos during the playoffs. The slates are a lot smaller. There's not a whole lot to talk about. But then again, at the same time, I notice a lot of people talking on Twitter about how a lot of the experts will not do any playoff videos either. And I don't like leaving you guys hung out to dry. But if you do want to see some playoff videos, really smash that thumbs up button. Leave comments in the comments section. Hit me up on Twitter. Try to get my attention as much as possible. Let me know that you are in demand to see more videos, and I'll make it happen. But I appreciate you guys hanging out with me every single week and all the support that you've given. I don't really do any daily fantasy sports outside of the NFL, so After, the next week or two, I may not be around anymore, but if you are able to keep my attention, let me know that you want more. I will continue to make more. So let me know. As always, you can follow me on Twitter. And I'm usually live tweeting during the games and making little comments here or there. And I always appreciate you guys kind of going back and forth with me, talking about the lineups. It's been really great. So I hope you guys enjoy the video, and I will see you for week 16. Good luck.